right, Isaiah, thank you for that. We'll talk to you coming up later on in the show. Right now, we're going to bring on our next guest, and we've got Marilyn Surber joining us to talk about what could be one of the scariest topics in the industry, right, is the potential driver shortage, that quote-unquote driver shortage, and how many drivers we actually need right now. We've got some new research coming out that finds that driver sentiment is saying that the amount of driver availability actually feels like it's improving. What are your thoughts on this?
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me. And I just wanted to say shout out to my friend Isaiah there for being on the air. I usually see him behind the scenes, so I was happy to see his face. Yeah, I think that is definitely probably how it feels in the market right now, and really indicative of the numbers that we're seeing in the market right now. I don't think it's a secret to any of us that, capacity has loosened up a little bit, right? And that drivers are more readily available, or it's easier to recruit or hire a driver right now than it was 12 months ago, certainly 18 months ago, 2 years ago, when we think about the market that we've been living in really since the second quarter of 2020. It's a very different place that we're in right now. And so I think, but I don't know that it won't all shake out whenever the market changes again. I think that sentiment will change again.
Marilyn, what's it been like for a recruiter in terms of what you've been able to see and how drivers have been coming in or slowed down or sped up, and how has that kind of changed over the course of, say, the last 6 months or so?
Yeah, that's a great question, because typically, in a down freight market, you see turnover spike and you see drivers, really leaving jobs in droves. And we haven't really seen that. So it's more of a steady, just kind of drip. We haven't seen a lot of up and downs in the driver application market, which what that means for a recruiter is that they're getting a steady stream of applications. So, I spent years as a driver recruiter, and it seems like some weeks were feast and some weeks were famine, and that can be really hard. And that's not what recruiters have been experiencing right now. It's been kind of a level playing field. So if you needed to hire 5 drivers, you hired 5 drivers. If you needed to hire 100 drivers a week, then that was probably is still a little bit of a tougher ask. But the drivers are there. And I think right now fleets are focusing on hiring the most qualified drivers.
So we have a chart to pull up, and this is, of course, a sentiment index from ACT Research about for-hire trucking. And we can see really since the start of 2022 was kind of when we see that sentiment flip, right? Anything above 50 is expansion, anything below 50 is contraction. We start to see that driver availability, the sentiment is improving for a lot of folks here, especially in this space right now. Do we think that this is more an indication of hope and optimism on the individual driver side, on that employee side, or on the carrier side, on the fleet side, on the employer side? Is it more people are feeling like I'm able to work and I'm more available, or are carriers feeling like, yeah, there's a lot more available talent out there?
I think carriers are feeling like there's a lot more available talent, because I think that driver sentiment is probably drivers are probably not as busy as they like to be, right? When drivers made a lot of money too when the freight market was going crazy. And so, while I don't think we're seeing down driver sentiment, I think again it's just kind of that steady stream. I think that is indicative of carriers being able to hire drivers faster for less money, and having more applications to choose from.
Marilyn, you mentioned that this is kind of not necessarily, you would have expected spikes and drops, especially in an economy like this. But as things move forward here, any ideas or predictions of how this may shake out again when the market turns? And again, most prognosticators are saying it's just going to be a slow recovery over time. What do you see in terms of how this may play out in the near future, if you want to put on your prognosticator's hat?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, we're in the fourth quarter now. We're going into the holiday season, which is traditionally a slow time for recruiting anyways, right? But January is usually one of the largest recruiting months that there is. And so I think that it's likely to happen again this year. Or next year, we'll be in 2024. I think it is likely that we will see that bump at the beginning of the year, with drivers kind of voting with their feet and, kind of returning to a traditional market And I think the time, we still don't know, is this really just kind of what the new norm is, or what a real post-COVID driver market is going to look like? I think we still don't have a clear understanding of that. And I think it will become more clear in 2024.
So, Marilyn, we talked to Thomas Wasson about this topic yesterday, and I want to ask you the same question that I asked him during 2020 and 2021 when fleets and carriers were having to work really, really hard to get quality talent in their seats. You saw a lot of them change their culture, change their offering, change their benefits, and really pivot to this employee-centric, we love our employees, we take care of them kind of mindset. And obviously now they're in the driver's seat for the inability to avoid a pun, and they have that ability to maybe walk back some of those cultural promises that they made, if that's raises, if that's benefits increases, what have you. Do you see any of that happening, or are a lot of these carriers and fleets still really on board with taking care of their people, and that's how they're proving retention numbers right now?
We haven't seen any of that being walked back. I think that we made a shift, a cultural shift in trucking, if you will, and we've kind of accepted there are some of these changes that we're going to have to make to just be able to recruit anyone, to recruit the next generation of drivers. And frankly, there's still a lot of changes that we need to make. But I think that companies are still staying true to that. They're taking care of drivers. They aren't changing they're not reducing pay. They're not doing those things, at least not in any widespread manner that we've seen.
Marilyn, as you look at it, what is maybe the biggest obstacle right now? Obviously, you still have optimism here. You expect a bump in January, but what is still the biggest obstacle that you've got to continue recruiting and continue to keep the next generation of drivers coming in the door?
I think it's still, I think that hasn't changed. I think it is still the job, and making sure that we have a job that people are proud to do, and that it's a livable job for folks, and attracting those folks to our industry, and making sure that we are telling everybody, shouting it at the top of our lungs, starting as young as we can to educate people about all the great things this industry has to offer. And I think as far as it pertains to like your existing fleet, and making sure that some of those folks don't leave the industry right now for good because it's a downtime, is communication and transparency and visibility with your fleet. Don't bring back those benefits, but also just communicate with your drivers what's going on. If they're having to sit somewhere, just tell them they're going to be sitting here, or let them know, yeah, times are tough right now, or times are different. Just make sure that you're keeping that line of communication open with your fleet, so that drivers aren't left on their own to kind of figure out what's going on.
I love that advice. Very sage as always. Marilyn Surber, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys.